has been spoken today in detail about agentic AI, autonomous sourcing, autonomous negotiations. I'm not going to dive deep into that, but rather I'll step up a little high and give a little bit of a big picture today. Well, Super Bowl was not long ago. So Seattle Seahawks won it. If you're with the sports news, they beat the Patriots. But during the break of the Super Bowl, there was an ad from Amazon Ring. They just put an ad to show how a video doorbell of Amazon Ring can help find lost dogs. Beautiful ad. You should go and see it if you have not seen it. But after the event, after Seahawks was enjoying and so on, there was a lot of commotion saying, "Are you watching our neighborhood with Amazon Ring?" Park this thought aside. Moving forward, Microsoft released a product called Recall. What it does is it takes screenshots of every single screen that you share, you talk, video calls during the day, and it stores it somewhere. What does it do with it? Does it send it out to someone? Park this thought again aside. Google has got a magic cube. This is a product that looks into your emails, whatever email you use, and says, a friend of yours is waiting for your arrival details by a flight, and you are busy, so Google Magic Queue picks up your flight details and send it to him, and you didn't even know about it. And he comes and picks you up, and then everything is fine. But park these three thoughts, Amazon Ring, Microsoft Recall, Google Magic Queue. Governance. Where are we on governance? Security, data security, privacy. Well, I'm not going to talk about all these, but these are important nuggets that you need to keep in mind as you navigate through agentic AI. I just want to give a little bit of a big picture before we get started. So if you look at the tech spending today, it's growing over 7.8%. Last year was about 4.4 trillion. Today, stretching the 5.3 trillion mark. There is a growth, as you can see, in the tech spending. Now, if you look at the categories of spend, all the magnificent seven, they are investing in huge data centers, AI data centers, and so on. So there is a substantial spending in data centers. That's hardware. But there's also a substantial spending in software, right? That will never stop, and it's not going to show any trajectory of stopping. So keep that in mind. Your software spend is going to grow substantially. Though it shows from last year at 47 to about 45%, the growth rate is pretty high. Third, within those categories, AI, software growth will be one of the highest. So it's not time to sit and stare. If you are already not on the AI journey, it's time to join the bandwagon. Okay. Now, countries tick differently. Here I try to put together a chart which shows how there has been the growth in countries and also the adoption of technologies. If you see, Europe is a little bit sluggish, but other countries which had tremendous growth like Vietnam, Taiwan, and so on are slowing. China as well, slowing down a little bit, but are others who are growing massively and so on. So keep a tab on where these countries are with regard to the growth in the future. That brings us to supplier value management. Now, this is a term that's loosely referred to in the industry as source to pay. For the want of a proper label, like an ERP, HCM, CRM, and so on, We coined at Forrester this term called supplier value management for the simple reason that you get value out of suppliers. So suppliers are a source of valuable information to companies. And that has traditionally not been the case. I put buyers and suppliers right in the middle, but typically buyers and suppliers is almost like a tug of war. Buyers try to extract the best conditions from the suppliers, and suppliers are order takers. But that has to go through a phenomenal shift. What I mean by that is, how do you leverage suppliers as a source of value? And that's why we call it supplier value management. Now, if you look at it, there are 6 components: intake and procurement orchestration, which my colleagues, my friends spoke about earlier. They are the new kids on the block. They've been added to these 6 categories, but in essence, it's the upstream and the downstream. So irrespective of where you are, it's high time to have a procurement technology. No longer can ERP, which is your single source of truth, can also be extended to handle procurement. It's time to have a supplier value management tool, be it a suite, be it a best of breed point solutions, a conglomerate, a suite, only a suite as a single source of truth. Whatever you choose is important to move away from legacy, home-built systems, to ERPs, towards supplier value management. Now, if you look at the trends in supplier value management, there is a shift from empowerment. There is a shift from enforcement to empowerment. What I mean by that is, no longer should procurement be the single command and control function in your organization's buying goods, services. Allow, democratize buying to happen in your organization if it's not happening. SVM can help you manage it, but allow people to choose between cost and value, or somewhere in between, but democratize buying. Second, ESG, mostly talked about in Europe. No, that's false. ESG is a very important trend that you can't turn a blind eye to. You need to be there where, you need to have solutions that are sustainable, that follow the ESG trend, and so on. Then the third is, as I mentioned first, suppliers are the source of value. Move away from cost optimizations towards value, right? So cost is important, but not the important point. So get value, and if you're getting value from your suppliers, Mercedes-Benz today does not start any product, be it an airbag, be it whatever, without suppliers in the conceptualization phase. They have 100,000 suppliers, but they get their strategic suppliers over in their R&D labs even before they design the first, let's say, an airbag or whatever part that's required for the car. Why? Suppliers bring in that value to them. Now, today's business is in such a way that you need to depend on suppliers all over the globe. A simple product that fits into your palm of your hand, like the iPhone, is sourced from 43 countries. 43 countries, how many suppliers, no one knows. How do you manage all that? So keep this in mind, this magnificent ability for you to manage those suppliers and get value out of the suppliers. Now, when you actually move into who are the players, who are the influencers and decision makers in organization, it's a little complicated picture that I put here. Don't get overwhelmed by it. But the chief procurement officer is something like a kingpin there, right? He's got the biggest of the bowling pins that I put for him. But mind you, there are other stakeholders in the organization that he needs to keep a tab on, right? The IT, obviously, because it's procurement technology. Then if it's contingent workforce, you need the HR. If it's AP, or if it's payments, invoices, it's the AP, AR folks. If it's contracts, general counsel. If it's supplier risk, it's risk officer, ESG, supply chain officer, and so on. It's very important to map different stakeholders in your organization, and that's of paramount importance today as you navigate through SVM, supplier value management. Another important point to note is you can't turn a blind eye to the CFO involvement when it comes to agentic AI. What I mean by that is IT is very important. IT is of paramount importance when it comes to agentic AI, but CFO, today we more often than not talk about the crawl, the walk, and the run. Experimentation, scaling, explosion method. No, I mean, most companies do this, and the CFO plays a very important role because he decides the budget allocation. There was a slide by somebody else earlier today, I think from Atish, who said that, about 20%, 30% budgets are still allocated to AI, right? I mean, that has to increase at an exponential rate, and the CFO will continue to play a predominant role in budget allocation until it becomes table stakes. Okay. Well, procurement is at an inflection point today. Unfortunately, CEOs in organizations spend less than just 1% of their time on suppliers. So what I mean by that is, if a CEO spends more time on procurement and the procurement department, then each company will actually get a magnum shift in where they are, right? But that's not happening. So procurement has to, themselves wriggle out of the hole, show that they are delivering value. CFO will decide budgets based on how what ROIs are they able to deliver, and so on. So procurement is a little bit of wriggling out of that cocoon and showing that they can deliver value. And that's not going to change overnight. That's because historically procurement has been the last to get funding, innovation. So you need to kind of look at the big picture and show that you can quickly get into that crawl, walk, and run. How do you do that? Now, we did a few studies here at Forrester. I'll just quickly run this through. The priorities for procurement, are a plethora of them, but the procurement and finance alignment is one of the top. ESG could be other, getting your data in place could be other, and so on and so forth. And then when you look at agentic AI as well, I mean, there are a lot of use cases which we saw this morning already, getting your tail spend in place so that the procurement is free to go and get into strategic activities. There are usage of the SVM technology per se, getting contracts in place. So look for those low-hanging fruits but high-impact ones in order to show that you can deliver those impacts. And then there are showstoppers. There are things that could come in the way apart from the budget's allocation. These days I do a lot of educational sessions at Forrester. What I mean by educational sessions for procurement is they just say, we have been told by our CIO or CXO to get upskilled on AI. How do you use AI in organization? So they come to us and says, how do we make a start, right? We heard this morning about upskilling. We heard this morning about choosing use cases, and so on and so forth. So it's very important that, as I mentioned, you can't sit and stare. You need to get onto the bandwagon. If anybody has been to China, let's say in the last 10 years, every year you go there or every couple of years, you can't avoid being, dragged into that AI world in China. Last time, one of the last times I went there, I didn't have this WeChat app, I didn't have the Alibaba app, and I was completely stranded. I couldn't move. But next time I was pretty well prepared. I got these apps because without that you can't be mobile in China. So it's kind of right from the time you get out of the airport, you are swamped by AI. So at some point in time, imagine that somebody asked this question. Change management is going to be tough. We are a government organization. We have fragmented processes, all that apart. put on your hat and say you can do it, and then at some point in time, you will find a way of getting it done. Well, there are a lot of use cases. I'm not going to drain the plethora of use cases on agentic AI, across upstream, across downstream. The low-hanging fruits would be a company, let's say a manufacturing company having thousands of suppliers, lots of invoices coming in. We heard the Bolt story and so on would be a classic case for agentic AI. Contracts, your own template, we just saw in the demo just previously, and comparing contracts with your own contracts, throwing out, redlining those contracts, throwing up clauses that need negotiations and so on. All that is becoming more and more table stakes. Now, you can't ignore the elephant in the room. When you look at the spend of organizations, it typically is an 80-20 rule. What I mean by that is, 80% of your transactions contribute to about 20% of the spend. That means procurement is spending most of the time on those 80% of spend. Why? That's a strategic spend. Now, the word strategic partner is the most misinterpreted word today. A lot of organizations, I can bet, get it wrong. Why? Strategic means it's equal to spend. That's wrong. Strategic partner need not be the partner with whom you spend a lot of money. A strategic partner is the one who can move the big needle of your company, who can get the company's objectives moving and attain those objectives. But a lot of people do this. They see, where do I spend 80% of my funding? They spend all the time with that, with those vendors, which is the case. You can't change that, but you need to, have an educational session on what strategic is. But accepting this as it is, this 80% of transaction contributing to just 20% of the spend is where you need to start and fix it today and also going forward. What I mean by that is, today you have the lovely agentic AI to automate your entire tail spend. Data, difficult to interpret. Don't worry, agentic AI will take care of you. Data is in fragmented systems. Don't worry, agentic AI can aggregate that for you. You don't have enough people to manage the tens and thousands of suppliers because we don't have people. That's the excuse. Agentic AI will do that for you. So allow agentic AI to take over your tail spend, that 80% of transactions, though it contributes to 20%, but you're going to fix this problem from now on. With that mentality, if you approach agentic AI, you will choose a platform, you will choose platforms, suite solutions, best of breed, point solutions, whatever that is, to help you automate your tail spend. Well, the negotiation agents, I'm not going to drain into how this works. A lot has been talked about already in the first half of today. These agents can understand history. If there is no history, they look into feeds, they look into Twitter feeds, they look into Facebook, they look into general other sources of information that's publicly available, and can give you the ability to automate, give you insights so that you can automate negotiations with your suppliers, with your long tail of suppliers. Just imagine a company, as I mentioned, having 100,000 suppliers, 20,000 suppliers. It's impossible to go and negotiate with each. What do these companies do? They have cookie cutter terms. Take it or leave it. So they just say, you are a tail spend, this is the condition. But procurement cannot put on that command and control function any longer. They should be more fair in their approach. And that's where this really comes into help. So it analyzes spend data, it analyzes transaction data, and it can look into history of information. It can tell you how you need to traverse this path so that these transactions. I mean, the demo was given about, extending your payment terms. You can have the unlimited liability conditions changed. You can have an extension of the total contract value. There are so many ways in which, but always there should be a give and take. There should be a trade-off. What does the supplier in turn get? The buyer gets all these extended payment terms. They get better conditions and so on. But what does the supplier get? The supplier can also kind of use autonomous negotiations to say, I want you to remove that 0-day termination clause from the contract, right? And I want to have at least a 60-day termination clause. So that's kind of the give and take that can happen through autonomous negotiations that will be, software can take care of it. Well, ROI is known. Today procurement is tasked to do more with less. So a large oil and gas giant used autonomous negotiations almost 2 years ago, I think. And they were able to identify 9 people who could go and do more strategic work. So that's an ROI. You can do things much faster. You can reach out to the tailspin of suppliers who you have always had cookie cutter terms. You can reduce your cycle time by, in days or even in minutes. You can actually do a negotiation in minutes. And as somebody mentioned this can happen simultaneously in real time with a multitude of suppliers. So the enormous gain is going to be there. So we talked about this competitive advantage. We talked about better terms and conditions. As I come to the end, it's very important to use the power of AI. It's not the time again for the third time to sit and stare, join the bandwagon, continuously align. You don't have to wait for immaculate data. Data will aggregate itself. Data will refresh itself. So start up with cleaning up your data first, make it at least usable in the first place. But immaculate data is not, you don't have to be after. That will happen automatically. It'll get, because that's the power of AI, autonomous. The move from automation to autonomous means that data will be refreshed, data will be aggregated, and data will be up to date at any point in time. Then get rally support from your organization, because more often than not, agentic AI is an IT-driven initiative. You need, as I mentioned in one of my bowling pin slides, get the organization behind you to invest in agentic AI for procurement. When these use cases see the light of the day, there's no going back, because you're already stepping yourself up from where you are onto a different plane altogether, and then from that plane is where you would continue to work. So the goal isn't perfection, but it's progress. So with that, I end the short presentation. I try to keep it as succinct as possible. So at Forrester, we kind of did a couple of opportunity snapshots. These are studies that we do in the industry. We interview a lot of procurement professionals. We interview other stakeholders and organizations. And one such report is out today. I believe this is that report here. So if you look at your tables, that study is on your desk. Have a look at it. So it says don't delegate AI. So what we mean by that is, procurement has to take control over the procurement use case studies naturally. But you have a very unique ability to kind of make that impact in organizations. So you need to leverage that. As I said, procurement needs to come out of their hole and show that they can get involved. So this is that book that's being released. There's one more that might be coming and doing the rounds now. Take a look at it.